Hello and welcome to Philbrick, the show, and more specifically on this platform, our very first Instagram live show. I'm your host Michael, and I just want to personally welcome you to what is our very first Instagram live show. Super exciting. And now if you didn't know, Philbrick LLC is a management and production company that assembles, manages, and produces creative projects and businesses. Our first creative project being this show itself, Philbrick, the show. And so now, on today's show, we are actually talking with myself as our first business interview. So we're super excited about that. And I know when I'm both hosting and being the guest, we might as well just say that I am introducing myself. So that's what we're going to say for this interview, that I'm actually introducing myself as both a creator and businessman going by the name Marlin White. So if all of that sounds good with you guys, let's go ahead and jump right on into it. Okay, so you're probably wondering a bit about the name. I already briefly mentioned it, Marlin White. But basically when I was getting started, which we'll get to that next question about what I wanted to do growing up, I knew I needed a stage name, a performance name, a pen name, whatever you want to call it, where it's somebody else, but you're still you. I nowadays refer to it as like my creator name, just because for the last decade or so, I've done quite many different creative projects. So that's what I go ahead and call myself. It's my creator name, creative name, whatever you want to call it. But when I was getting started, I knew I wanted to have one, but I also knew that I had to be careful because I wanted to make sure that it could still incorporate my actual legal name for when I would one day become famous / get paid. I wanted to make sure I could take care of that. So yes, starting off pretty young, I was already thinking really big about stuff like that, which I think is good to do, and you should do if you're getting started in something. Like, why not? Why not dream big? So I ended up going with my middle name as kind of like the main focus of Marlin White. It is my full name, Michael Marlin White. So right off the bat, it was pretty easy once I saw that. Although I was trying to choose between, should I just go with Marlin White or Marlin White? I knew I didn't want Michael Marlin White because that is just, wow, that is a long name. But when I was searching, kind of like in that name search, was that I knew Michael White was way too common, way too popular. If you search that, go Google search, any search engine search, you'll see thousands, hundreds of thousands of people showing up as Michael White. And if you're a creator, that's kind of the last thing you want, especially if you want to be a musician. You don't want to be like, so yeah, I'm Michael White, but I'm not that Michael White or that one or that one or that one. I am this one. So I knew automatically I couldn't do that, but when it came to the name Marlin White or Marlin White, when I searched that, I was basically competing with fish. The white marlin fish. So you can look it up. You'll see pictures of all these guys like holding these fish, like, look at me, I've got this white marlin. And then you'll see like my random face, and that can be like, yeah, that's me. Just look for the not fish or the not guy holding the fish. The other really cool thing that I saw within that is, when I was younger, I actually didn't really like my middle name. It was my grandpa's name, so it was a family name. But it was like very unique, old-fashioned. Not many people had heard of it. Or if they did, they were like, hey, Merlin, like the wizard. And I'm like, hey, no, it's Marlin, Marlin. And even now, some people still don't even know how to spell it. But I've gotten over that. And then it's really cool, though, because when I was looking to create that, stage name, creator name, I was like, it's so unique. Something I didn't like that's now like very good. Not many people have heard of it. Good, because then when you hear it, you'll remember it. So all of these things kind of flash forward. I got to see of like, wow, it really came to be and really worked out. So for what I needed it for and what I've been using it for the last years, it's actually done really well. And then, as I mentioned, on to the next part though, even before choosing the name, you're probably wondering, like, when did you begin thinking about being a creative person, having a creative career, being a businessman, all of that put together? And I have to say it was probably around my junior year of high school. At least that's what I pin it back to. So I would have been probably around 16, 17, I think 17 by the time I was jumping into it. But I was actually in Spanish 3. Hola, ¿cómo estás? And we had a we had a project where we could do a song. And at the time, I had done a lot of musical theater, and I was like, hey, let's do a song. We can write and create our own song. And so that's what I ended up doing. I created the words. It was like El Mundo de Dios, the world of God, was the song title, and then kind of created my own word, the melody, and then I did it all a cappella. I had this really cool app where you could do boom, 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 one of those things. So I did a whole bunch of different tracks and then performed it, like played it for the class. It was received really well, and so that was super exciting. But then the other weird thing is, as I saw other groups or people that had chosen the song, was that they just chose pop songs and then added and made up their own words in Spanish, because it was a Spanish class. But they didn't create the tune. And to me, that was so weird, because I'm like, I thought if we created a song, like a song was like you create the words, the melody and harmonies, as well as the music or the background music. And that was not the case. And then the more I talked to people, it turned out that not everyone just had these, tunes in their mind that they could just come up with, or words they could come up with, or melodies that, if they were just walking around, would be like, yeah, this is in my head. I can pour it out on a piece of paper, or like record it on my phone. So to me, that was kind of the first like, this is something that not everybody can do, and I should continue to look into this. And then, as I mentioned, I had actually started doing musical theater back when I was in 6th grade. My first show was You Were a Good Man, Charlie Brown. If you haven't seen it, you should actually go and check it out. It's actually a pretty good and cute show. The more times you watch it, I feel like it gets better and better. It is a little bit weird, but when I was in that, I was actually the part of Linus, which isn't a huge singing part, but it was my first time singing in front of people, so that was huge, kind of kicking that off. It's also around that time when I started learning to play the piano. I played trumpet from 5th to 8th grade, wasn't very good, just wasn't my thing. But on the flip side, piano, you could play the high notes just by moving your hand down and playing a key. You could breathe however you wanted, and you could also sing and play. So all of this was coming together starting probably in middle school. I do remember though, in 6th grade when I was in that, I was right when my voice was changing, and it was so hard to sing like basically all the songs in that, because they have a lot of like weird harmonies. And so I had to like remember like, oh, on this song I could sing in my high voice, and then in this one my voice will crack, so I sing low, and then this song it's up and down. So if you're young and listening to this, don't worry. It gets better. Your voice should eventually even out. But I do remember that being like a funny thing about that. And then as I was going into high school, I got really into Michael Bublé, mostly because I still really like that type of music, the jazz, the big band, anything, I don't know, just the performance element to the song that you can hear just by listening to it. So that's how I really got into singing. I also did the worship band in high school. So all of this was kind of moving me towards like learning how to sing. I did a ton of musicals throughout high school, strengthening that, did musical theater classes. And then even in the musical theater class, it was like a Theaters 2 honors class. The main part of the class was like teaching you how to put on a production. And the way they let you do that yourself was each person had like a certain week where they put on a mini production that was played during the lunch period. They called them brown bags. Doesn't really matter the name. So we each got to do our own. I'd worked with a friend of mine, and we had both kind of wanted to push it towards the idea of doing like musical brown bags, because why not? Musicals are so much better than just straight plays, which if you're a play person, I'm sorry. They just make me so sleepy. But so I ended up, he already had found a script that had the words. So that was my first time creating melody to words that were already there. And then by the time it came around to my turn, I worked on actually 2 different ones where I created 2 different mini musicals for these brown bags. One was like called A Day of Flying. It was a flight attendant who was afraid of falling. She had the fear of falling. So it was kind of a short skit on that. And then the other one was called Stage Kiss. A guy has his first kiss on stage via a stage kiss and falls madly in love with the girl he kissed, becomes emotionally and romantically attached to her. So that was the fun I had in high school. I also was in the talent show 2 different years, sang original songs in that. I sang the national anthem my senior year. It was not a very good experience. I was up in this tiny room with all of these men coaches, didn't have a monitor or feedback to even hear what I was singing. I had this weird thing too where I think it's when you're nervous And as I'm like doing a lot more talking for this show and all of this, I found it too, if you think too hard about when to swallow the saliva in your mouth, you actually don't swallow. So then you're just collecting all the saliva in your mouth, and then your body at one point is just going to go, and then like that, like you're like an audible gulp and like a type of thing. Maybe not the but definitely a gulp. And so that happened to me in that song, and I gulped, and I was just like, it's a mess. Couldn't hear it. So I told myself, like, never again will I sing the national anthem. Now I've moved from that to, if I do sing the national anthem, it needs to be like out on a field, not in a tiny room, and I need to have some sort of feedback in my ear or via a monitor speaker. And then kind of closing out my high school, I sang at the baccalaureate, which is a part of the like graduation process. It's the one we had was like a Thursday evening at a church and very like kind of formal, but I got to sing an original song. That was like my biggest crowd, maybe still is the biggest crowd I ever sang in front of, which was a couple hundred at least, because there was like 300 to 400 of us plus all their parents, so maybe around 1,000 people, which that was really cool. I don't know, super cool just to think back on that. But all this was really helpful. All this to say is that really pushed me towards being a creator and a creative person. Like by the time I was ending high school, I wanted to go into being a singer-songwriter, as well as after all the musical stuff, also double as a musical writer, because why would you not want to do that? It's so much fun. But that was also helpful because in my sophomore year, I had wanted to be an entomologist, which studies bugs. From that, I read a really good series about forensic entomology, so studying bugs on dead bodies. And then from that, I realized you're just basically looking at maggots all day long. And I was like, doesn't sound so great. So then I moved to looking into being a forensic pathologist, which is just dead bodies, not so much the bugs on the dead bodies. So I've had like a wide range, even now, up until now, of like, oh, this sounds interesting. Let's research the heck out of it and figure out if I want to do it. Okay, no, maybe not. When it came to the singing songwriting, I got a bunch of books on like having a career in the music industry. And that's what really pushed me towards knowing what to study in college, being business management. Just they talked a lot about how artists can be taken advantage of in the creative world with the contracts they sign, the royalties they give up. They had a lot of different examples. But basically, you either have to hire someone to manage you, which is expensive, especially if you are new in the field, and who has money for that? Or you can learn to do it yourself and represent yourself and go out there as a businessman and as a singer-songwriter. So that was what I had planned to do, all the plans that I had. And it was, it was good. It was fun. I had set up the YouTube channel back when I was in high school, so that was the main forum. Then things kind of shifted over to social media with Instagram, and I've kind of been going throughout that. But yeah, I eventually learned, which I'll mention in a bit, that business was really boring, so I didn't stay in there too long. But I'll give you like an expedited journey on my other creative works as we keep moving forward, which I talked about my high school, so that was kind of like building me up to where we are now in college. And the first thing I actually did was, so as a new college student, I had just come off of performing and like producing that show Stage Kiss, which I was super excited about. I found a student-run theater production company, and I think while they were tabling, I was like, "Hi, I'm Michael. I wrote this mini musical. Can I turn it into you for maybe you guys want to perform it or do short, like a short segmented shows?" I was just so hooked on the idea of like, once you have a show, you can find someone else to perform it and still get it performed. So for me, that was really cool. Nothing actually really came from that though. I did join the acting club, went to their meetings, the different things they had. It wasn't though until December of my freshman year, so the end of the fall semester, that they came to me and asked if I wanted and would make it into a full-length show for their spring production, which being, new to all of this, but also just as excited. I'm like, of course. Like, you don't even have to ask. You just tell me, like, go home for the month of January. I didn't have a job yet. And just spend the whole month that you have off for winter break writing a show. So that's what I did, and hooked me even more to wanting to write musicals for a career. I had this whole, creative outline of, establishing the creative flow, establishing and maintaining of like you wake up and then you read something creative and then you eat more food and then you start on this and then you take another break for food. A lot of food. If you do anything creative, you'll probably learn it makes you hungry. That and having good coffee, but also watching good content. I was writing, it was kind of a funny show, so I needed humor within that. So watching a couple dumb shows that are just funny and then reading creative books, all that really helped me. But I got to January and actually got to write and create this full show out of a 15-minute show, which was super cool. And kind of looking back, the funny thing was, and I didn't know this till afterwards, were people at the show afterwards like, wow, that was really good. I heard you were a freshman. I was just like, oh, this is going to be awful, but I want to see it anyways. And I was like, oh, okay. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. But maybe don't underestimate me next time. Not so much that, but I do think it's kind of a funny thing that I don't know if everyone has it, but as you do a lot of creative works, you can tell that people who are like, they're going to fail or it's going to be terrible. And then they actually are surprised when it's not terrible or when it's actually good, and this was good. So overall, it was a really great experience. And I also learned later on that they only asked me to do that because they literally had nothing else to do. So it wasn't just like they chose me because they loved the preview. They were just like, man, we got nothing. This kid sent this though. Let's ask him. Okay. So stuff like that I think is just super funny. Just as you go. And then later on in college, I actually worked with a music major student who went on to create the music book and piano accompaniment for the show, because my next goal was to get it published so that everybody could perform it. Turns out that's a lot harder than it may seem, but that was a big part. Kind of finishing out college was really focusing on that. I had this huge red carpet publishing promotion event. We sang through the show. I worked with actors for that. I produced the whole event. It was really cool. You can see photos on social media if you'd like. But that led to me then, publishing the book on Amazon, which was a huge thing for me. I also had this whole plan of I did the plan. I sent the script to the local high school, so the high school I went to some other theater companies. I only heard back from one, and they were just like, thanks for sending this, but we don't take unsolicited scripts, so have a nice day. And I was like, oh, okay. So, and later on, I did learn that now kind of the vibe with writing musicals or maybe even films is that if you create something, you have to be willing to produce it yourself. In the old days, more so you could probably find a production company to put on what you write. Nowadays, though, if you're going to start something, you should just be prepared to produce it yourself, which I don't mind because I actually really like the admin stuff that goes within these projects. And then kind of finishing out college, the last year or so, I joined the film club because I was like, what's the next step after theater? It's film. I had so many people that weren't able to come to theater shows and like, I'll come to your next one. I'm like, how do you know there will be a next one? And since college, I don't think I've been in a theater show. So those people who said see you next time, I'm like, okay, you will not see me again. I mean, maybe. I'm hopeful that I will do more shows, create more shows. But I knew with film that you could, you spend all this time and work similar to theater, but you get to capture it. And then it's electronic. You can save it. You can store it in the cloud, online. You can send it. And so that's what really intrigued me. But I realized that the only reason I knew how to write scripts for theater and do well with musicals and all that is because I basically grew up on the stage doing a bunch of shows and theater. So I was like, I think the best way to learn how to write for film is just to go ahead and try to get yourself into a short film. So I ended up working on 2 different short films. They waste a lot of time, let me tell you that. You sit around for so long. So that was kind of my experience with that. But I did learn a lot in that I learned how things run on a set, the different people, a lot of the different positions. I got to hold a script, look at the script, see how people wrote scripts. So all of that in building up and learning how to write the script, I would say was definitely worth it. And it's something that I'm so glad I did. And then I mentioned a little bit, but I started in business. I ended up switching before the end of my freshman year to hospitality because the business, it was boring. I got to see my older sister who did animation and illustration. She did art. She did something she loved, and I'm like, I want to do something I love. I want to do something fun and exciting. And it was like, business. A lot of the classes too had this mindset of like, you'll get a job and you'll be in a cubicle, and then you spend your whole life trying to get up to the C-level executive spots. And I was like, okay, that does not sound interesting. It's not fun. It's not feasible for really, it was a class of maybe 100 to 200 people. I'm like, what are the chances that all of us are going to do this? Not many. So I had a friend who was in hospitality, but and basically on a trip that we went on, a backpacking trip with the school, I shared a tent with him, and he told me all about how he was doing this major, and you still learned how to run a business, but it was more focused on customers, your customer service, your customer experience, and then accounted for hotels, travel and tourism, event management, food and beverage, just really cool things. And I'm like, I think I could be interested in all of this too. However, the flip side of that was when I was ending college, I was actually interested again on, in the field of business and startups more particularly. That's something that I'm like, oh, maybe as a freshman, if I heard more about startups, I would have been more interested in that. But I think I learned a lot, and all the event, stuff that I did and the events I put on, I've actually been able to use that for a lot of the creative projects that I have done and am doing now. And that's actually one of my favorite parts, is you spend all this time working on whatever the project is, and then you get to celebrate it. And what better way than to like throw a really good party? Or I always like fancy events. So most of my events, if you come to an event by me, will ask you to dress up, because I feel like people never dress up anymore, and people look so much prettier in full hair and makeup and suits and ties, whatever guys would wear to that. But so as I was leaving college, I would say kind of two paths were emerging at the same time that kind of helped push me along this career and different path, as like trying to figure out what I want to do as a creator and within the world of business. One path was planning for the short film that I went on to produce, and I actually acted in it too. Weird. But I couldn't find anyone to do it. The film club didn't want to do it. I actually don't really understand the humor of people in the film world, at least college film world. The ideas they chose were weird. They're like, this guy goes out and he tries to steal drugs at a party, and then he ends up getting stabbed, and it ends with him falling, and it's called like The Neighborhood. Stuff like that where I'm like, okay, I don't get this. I don't like their humor. I didn't get. So I don't know, but I was like, basically, if I want to do a short film and I want to do it fast, like now's the time to do it. As I'm getting out of college, I still have good connections to the campus. I still know quite a bit of people that could maybe help out. So I'm like, I gotta do it soon. And then the second path though was that I think in my last year of college, I actually found a listing for a handwriting job online for this company called Punk Post that creates and sends beautifully handwritten cards. So you should actually go ahead and check them out. I ended up working with them for 5 years, both as a handwriting artist, and then I joined their team, which I was looking for a startup, as a working in their customer service, managing that and leading that, as well as their community management, so working with all these artists. But basically that path really got me into the handwriting, the creating. I had nice handwriting. I learned how to write nicely in the 6th grade, and had been practicing throughout then. I was always someone who liked to doodle, but I wouldn't say I was necessarily like an artist. So it really pushed me to get a lot better. I learned from the other artists on the team. They really pushed me, and that eventually got me set up for being what I would say into digital art and design. So all thanks to my job and time at Punk Post, which I have to say too, because I'm still friends with them, and even though I'm not working there now, I gotta give them a plug, because you can actually send your first card for free on their iOS app. So if you have an iOS iPhone, get their app and you can send the first card for free. It's super fun. Or visit them on their website, punkpost.com, punkpost.com. But lots of great stuff came out of that and learning. We'll jump back to that. But bringing back to the film, the short project, I knew, as I said, I had to do it on my own. And when I was doing it, I knew I couldn't pay anybody. But with a lot of these creative works, it is very common to do like a trade for pay type of thing. And so what I figured out was like, I'm going to ask, tell the people like, I can't pay you monetary wise, but I can feed you on the sets. And my goal for it is to get it in a film festival and to get it up on IMDb, where you will get official movie credits. So for me, I was like, this is what I'm telling everyone, that this is what I'm paying you, the form of payment I'm giving you. And at the same time, I knew those were my two goals. So the main ones being get it up on IMDb, which I learned in order to get it up there and to keep it up there, it needs to be shown at least once at a public film festival. So I was like, oh man, in order to fulfill like my promise to these, it was a small cast and crew, but to these people, like I got to make sure it's good enough to get there, as well as I can find someone to get it there. And I actually did get that accomplished. So for me, that was huge, super exciting. It was so I can say it this way. I got it played at a film festival in Southern California. I drove down there, got to see my big face on the big screen, my face on a big screen. And that's the cool way of saying it. The more like realistic way was like, it was a small town called Culver City, right near Santa Monica. I drove starting at like 8 p.m., arrived to this creepy little motel at 1:30 a.m., checked in. It played at 12 p.m. in the day, which if you know anything about film festivals, no one goes to them in the daytime. So it was me, a friend I knew who was also a fellow handwriter with Punk Post. We went and saw it, and there was maybe 5 other people that filled this this huge, like your standard movie theater. And I'm pretty sure it was just everyone who created their own films. So it was very like, this is so cool, but also like, oh, we're like at the very, the bottom of the totem pole. But regardless, I think it was really cool. And it fulfilled what I wanted and my goals. And then I feel like with most creative projects, you have goals and then you tell yourself, okay, for the next one, I want to do this, this, and this better. This was definitely one of those. And even when I see it, I'm like, yeah, the next time I'm on a film, we will have lots of great improvements and implementations. But I think that's part of the whole process too. You're always learning, you're always going, taking what you can, doing the best you can at that moment. And then what else can you say? Like, hey, I tried my best, I did my best. So cool. And then moving on to digital art, I already kind of mentioned how I got into that. But I learned that a majority of the artists I've been working with used an iPad and Apple Pencil, and I'm all about like what's the quickest, easiest, most efficient way to do something. I don't want to learn a new computer program or programs because there's many different ones. I don't want to spend, ongoing money again and again, because now if a lot of the Adobe programs, you buy subscriptions and then each year they're like, hello, thank you again, we are going to charge you. I'm like, oh, gross. I don't want that. So I learned from polling a bunch of different people that they use, the iPad Pro, an Apple Pencil, and an app called Procreate. And it was like $10 for the app, no other charges. I'm like, perfect. So I ended up making that investment, which got me into creating card art for Punk Post, which was also another very cool, like one of those milestones where when I started, I'm like, wow, one day I want to have a card design of my own. And then, by like maybe 2020 or 2019, 2020, around then was like kind of the first time I got to see this coming true. I'm like, wow, a card design, wow, cool. And then from there I got into creating coloring sheets. And then after you do one coloring sheet, you're like, oh my gosh, what do we do from here? A coloring book. So that was kind of early spring of 2020, I guess you would say, was when I was coming out with my first coloring book. And as I mentioned, I said I like to do a lot of the events. I'd actually been planning like this really cool, like family friendly, bring your kids and have free coloring pages and you can buy a book if you liked what you started on type of a thing. And that was right in March of 2020, which was when the area I'm located in, we closed, like we were one of the first to like completely lock everything down, shut everything down. So it went from like, this is how I'm going to promote this new work that I'm starting on to I have no audience to meet up with in real life, and I need to figure out like how I'm going to market this solely on online, where you're just like at home, you're like, so guys, I made a coloring book, it's a really big deal, you should go and buy it. So it was very weird starting it out, but the flip side of that being that this was something that I could do from home that didn't, I didn't have to go out, and it was a potential way to make more money while being at home. And I also created other coloring sheets that I would post for free online. So it was just a really fun activity for many people to do during these lockdown times when you either couldn't leave your house or you didn't want to leave your house, depending on who you were. From there, more recently and during that lockdown time, I created a clothing line on the site called Bonfire, which allows you to either create, single designs, buy it, they'll ship it to yourself, or you can create like a campaign-styled shop. And so that's what I went with, created a bunch of different designs, put them on different clothing items, made a whole little like shop on their website around that. And so that's what I call as my clothing line. And I would like to, further look into doing that more on upcoming projects and those down my future, just seeing how cool it is to have a t-shirt with a design of your own. It's very cool. And then moving on from there, I can let you know, currently as a creator and like having my own self as a business, what I'm selling currently, I've been focusing in on the children's coloring books. As I mentioned, that has just been the best way to get what I can do at home out to you at your home. I have them self-published via Amazon, so it's actually really cool that you can get the books on Amazon, which I'm sure many people already shop there, as well as I think most of them are covered by Prime, so you could potentially get a book I created in 1 to 2 days. So that's very cool. I have 2 of them on sale now that are kind of more just like children's coloring books. One is the first one that I mentioned. It's called Color Fun Creatures, just a bunch of different creatures and animals I created. And then the second one that I came out with on April Fool's Day of last year, so 2021, which I thought was funny. April Fool's, I created a book. Was like a character one, so focus on one character, and then you could create like you could name them and create a story after them. And then this past Christmas, I came out with what I call an activity and story coloring book, that being that it was a story I wrote when I was 8 years old. I found I'm like, I should make this into, a storybook, so it'll have pictures, but I don't want to do the coloring, so we'll have it be a coloring book at the same time. And then within that process, I also added more activities that the little kiddos could do. So that's kind of the new thing, and kind of where I want to keep pushing and learning and growing within the segment of the business and as a creator. And then I also mentioned the clothing line, but that's also, you can find that online too if you want to buy and support that. A lot of the things though, as I've been beginning out, is that kind of the mentality is that I try to price it as cheap as I can, because I would rather people buy it and get it than say like, I can't afford this, so I'm not going to buy it. Not that that is always the case, but in a lot of these projects, that's been my mentality, knowing like I'm probably not going to make a lot of money on it, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, I feel like as a creator, most people, at least myself, like I just want people to get it in their hands. I want them to listen to, if I'm doing a song, I want you to listen to me singing. If I'm playing a piano, listen to me play. If I'm creating a coloring book, like get it in your hands, get to experience it, share it with your friends or family. So that's kind of been my, mentality from there. But then moving on from here, I can let you know kind of what I'm looking forward to for my future as a creator and businessman. I have a few bigger goals, so I'm going to go ahead and share those with you. Within the coloring books, I mentioned I'd like to expand more into the activity books of things, creating more specific activity books, where this past one I did was more of like the story coloring book, where like, all right, here's some fun activities at the beginning and end. I think it'd be really cool to create like a full in-depth activity book. One, because it's something else that kids can do that stimulates their creativity, their imagination, but also helps them think. So I don't know, just a lot of different skills that you can touch while using your hands, and I think that's super cool. A bigger goal within that would be hopefully to find either a school or more likely like a homeschooling curriculum that I could kind of figure out like what is the need or what could be used in this type of curriculum, and then create something and kind of market it either to specific homeschooling parents themselves, or ideally, if there was a curriculum, try to get my foot in there. And I usually have found with creative projects, I do good when I'm given a task or an assignment. So if they said, we need an activity book and this is what we're looking for, then cool, I will go in and I will do that for you. So that's something that I still need to research a bit more about what that looks like. So that's kind of like you're hearing kind of the first time I've actually spoken it out loud of what I'm looking to do within that. Within books though too, I also want to do an illustrated book, a children's illustrated book. As I mentioned, I've done coloring books, but kind of as I've been working up, the last one, the activity storybook, was like kind of the final step before the next one, at least as far as illustrated books go, is that I need to add in color and shadows and shading, everything that I am not that fond of doing, which is why I like coloring books. Keep it nice and simple, black and white. Have your kid or yourself, because adults can color too. Have them go in and add their own color, and then it's, specific to them. It's fun, but also for me, it creates less work and less stress and less, just staring at the screen like something looks wrong. Something is not right here. So for me, creatively, that's really going to push myself. And I think that's important, that you should be pushing yourself as you go. Makes it a lot more fun. And then I would actually also like to write a book. I began planning one out and creating an outline back like last summer, so not quite a year ago. And it would be a fiction book, and that's just something that, I don't know, it's a goal. Like how the short film thing was a goal, this is a goal. Like, I need to write a book. I do so much with writing, but the tricky thing I found, and I knew this going into it, is that, one, I've never written this, that long of a work. It's a lot of writing. It's a lot of time put into it. A lot of editing too, or going back and being like, this doesn't work. Get rid of that. Go back. And then you need to be very descriptive. Typically, in most books, you need to add a lot of description. And my reading style as a reader is that I like to read fast, and I don't really care about the fluffy creative details, which is funny, I would say that, but I'd taken a creative writing class, and they wanted you to explain everything, how it felt to touch this, and the color of this, and the way this felt. I'm like, I don't care. As a reader, I just want the characters, the dialogue, the story. Go. It needs to be good. But most books, you do need to have a lot of description. So that's kind of like a challenging point. I already know as I go into it. And that's why I like writing the scripts, because you're basically giving like a line or two, maybe a short paragraph of like, this is your setting, this is the scene, begin scene, and then you just have your characters talking. So that's why I come back to like whenever I start a writing project, I'm like, wow, I really like script writing so much better. But it is a goal of mine to write a book, so I'm thinking hopefully in the next 1 to 2 years maybe I'll get that up and going, and you'll be able to read a book by myself. And then kind of from there, an overall idea I have, kind of two different ones, is that one, I think within the niche of children's books, it would be really fun to create kind of, I keep coming back to thinking of like Winnie the Pooh, and how you have all these really fun, like iconic characters that as a kid, like from very young, you grow up with these characters. You watch all these episodes, these books, you have these songs, and like for the rest of your life, you're like, yep, I know them. I know Rabbit. I know Piglet. I know Owl. You know all these characters. So I'm really intrigued with that, both for growing myself as a creative person and an artist, but also like the business side of things and finding something that, you can make bigger and bigger and bigger, and just keep it growing and keep it going. Because I found like when you make lovable characters and you really like your characters, nothing is more fun than like staying in their world when you're creating and just making their stories and lives keep going. So that's something I also hope to one day. This is an even bigger project, kind of similar to like the kids one, but think of, you have a fairy tale that you're told and when you're younger, and then from there I would create my own, fairy tale theme. Then we go from there to creating a children's book, an illustrated book about that. Very simple, where you grow up with your parents reading it to you as a bedtime story. Oh, it's just like the fairy tale I knew. Then as you get a little bit older, you have the same story, but it's a little bit thicker within the plot. You're learning more. Likely this is like middle school reading, early high school. And then kind of the last final of like the written work would be like the full in-depth like young adult or adult writing genre of it. That being that, it doesn't even have to be, there's nothing inappropriate about it, but more like as you get older in life, you learn a lot more like they don't love that person as a kid, you're just like, okay, they're not in love. But then as you get older, you're like, what are the reasons behind the love, and what kind of love? It's unrequited love. Oh, and you have all this a lot more depth to it. So that to me is a very cool idea of really getting to grow this idea and adding more and more and more. And then from there, of course, you have a series on it or a film in which I would also create original music to be put in it. I don't think I would act in it, but maybe a cameo of, yes, that's me. I wrote this. So that's like kind of the main thing within that. And then now we're headed towards the last few questions because we are getting to the end of our time today. And I'm going to share with you some of the challenges that I've had to overcome in the business. I've written them down. I'm going to kind of read through them just so that we are good on time. But I think a lot of this you can relate to whether or not you're a creator and in the creative world or you're in the business world. I feel like a lot of these hit all over, which I think is helpful for the majority of the listeners, depending on your background, what you're interested in, where you're headed with your life, your career, personally, business-wise. But so I'll just go through them. So basically a challenge of like what you're passionate about versus making money. That's a big thing, especially in the creative world, but really anything of like, do I make the decision to do what I want to do, what I feel is right, even though it might not make very much money, it might be risky. I'm supposed to like have a family and kids and a house and, medical payment, all of this, but this is what I'm passionate for. Or do I go towards like, this will make me money? It may not be like what I'm happiest in, but at the end of the day, it'll make me the money I need to have these other goals of the family, the kids, the wife, the house, whatever. So that was, and continues to be kind of a big one. And then within that too, of not knowing whether to like fully pursue the creative, quit everything and hit the road and pursue this, or just getting a standard job and doing it on the side, because a lot of people can do that. And that is a very viable option in whatever, even the side gigs and hustles you do. This is the one that is like the steady income, and then I do this for fun to pour my passions into. From myself, particularly feeling like I had to pick just one creative venture and stick with it rather than try out a bunch of different things. And I'm glad I didn't stick with just one thing. And within the last decade, I really have been able to try so many different things, which for me, I probably keep mentioning, but I do get bored easily. So that to me is super important of like keeping it interesting, keeping life going, fast paced, going. But within that too, a challenge of not knowing where I fit within the creative world. And a lot of this started in high school where I was like, I can act, but I don't consider myself like an actor or like the actors that I went to school with. Or like, I can sing, but I don't consider myself a singer. Or I can play quite a few instruments fairly well, not classically trained, but enough if you don't know music, you'd be like, you're a musician. But I'm like, but I'm not a musician. So, and then with art too, they're like, you're an artist. I'm like, no, I would say my sister is an artist because she's very good at it. And I create doodles and kind of like BS my way through. So a lot of that for me is like learning like, it's okay to really not know where you fit. And hence why I think I like being able to say like I'm just a creator, because I create different things. It doesn't matter what, it can be a different range of many different things. Other challenges is like you spend a lot of time on a project and you get very little like monetary outcome from it. I did mention this already, that it's kind of a given, and that's, I'd rather people have it than not have it. But at the same time, everyone's like, that's great, you can make money from that. And they say like, we're so excited to buy that coloring book, we're so excited to do this, we're excited to see your show, or we'll see your next show. But then they don't, which is sad, but it's just part of it. And then also you have to promote yourself like crazy at all times. Even if you do it like crazy all the time, it still doesn't feel like it's enough. Or I don't know, that's the other thing with social media and all the different algorithms, is like you can be giving your best and your best that you can, and it won't show it. And it's not your fault. It's not anything you're doing. It's just whatever the algorithm is feeling that day, or maybe they don't like your account for whatever reason. And then I think kind of the last challenge, not that any of these are necessarily bad, but like finding friends and family that truly get, in quotes, what you're doing. Family, like your intimate family, I feel like it's a little easier to get them on the same page. Friends, maybe a friend or two, but those people that like really understand what you're doing. They're there to support you. They're not gonna like bash on your ideas or say, like, you shouldn't do that. Why are you doing this? Or I don't get that. Even though that comes with a lot of things, when you're doing a lot of this and you are passionate about it, that is very tricky if people don't get what you're doing or why you're doing it. So having a good support system is super important to have, and it's not been that challenging for me, but it is a challenge of like, who can I rely on and who can I tell these new ideas to? And then from here, let's go to the encouragement, because I think a big part of being in the creative world and the business world, and for this show, is sharing the encouragement in either world or your personal world. So some encouragement, or I guess tips and tricks, is that like you can take your time to develop your ideas if it's for a new business, a business venture. Like, it doesn't always have to be so quick and fast paced. The world, especially if you're in the Bay Area, will feel like, go, 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 you have to go. You haven't created a business yet. You're almost 30 and you're not even close to being on the top 30 for Forbes. What are you doing with your life? You're not married, all of this. And you're like, I have to create something. And it's like, no, it's okay. A lot of times the idea is what I think of it when it comes to songwriting is it takes time to mature. It's like wine, it needs time to ferment. And like age appropriately and mature. And you'll see that a lot of ideas in your life, maybe they're not good now, but maybe in a few years you'll be like, well, now is the right time to do it. Let's go. And then at the same time, I say, like, be careful with who you share your ideas to. Having that good support system is really good. I know just personally that if I share an idea too early on in the process, you get a lot of feedback that maybe you weren't looking for. And that is either negative or like pessimistic, and it just kills the idea flat out. And so I'm like, oh, wow, this was so cool in my head and for the last 2 days, but I also haven't had enough time to answer all these questions they're asking. But based on those like 3 things I said, I don't think I should do it anymore. So that's one thing that, like, word of caution. But I also find that it usually kills my idea, regardless, even if it's something good. The more people I tell that I'm like, okay, now it's no longer fun to do, or it's no longer exciting, or it just doesn't happen. So I think there is fun in, only sharing what you're doing with a few people, those people in your support system, your family, your friends, and then kind of keeping it a surprise for when it's getting ready. Other like tips I would say is sometimes you have to create these opportunities for yourself. A lot of what I've mentioned, especially in high school and early college, was because I took the extra steps to jump forward and put myself in the position to be like, hey, I know you need singers for the national anthem. Can I do it? Hey, I know, you're going to have singers at the baccalaureate. Can I audition to sing an original song? Hey, I'm the new kid at the college and I have a musical that I want to sing. So you have to put yourself out there. And I think that is good to know. And sometimes things will fall in your lap and you'll just be going along like, hey, this opportunity came to me, I'm gonna take it. And other times you really have to be like, get out of your comfort zone and just be like, we're gonna try. They can say no. Like with the sending my musical to other high schools, other production companies, I got one that said no, others were just silent. Even the high school I went to said nothing. And I was just like, okay, I tried. I took that opportunity. I'm not necessarily always going to I'm giving up on it, but right now that's not the place for me. So just knowing that and keeping that in mind, sometimes you do have to get out of your comfort zone. I'd also say just keep moving forward. I usually just keep going until new doors open or doors close or your path kind of changes. I never would have thought that I was going to be an artist, because I still don't always feel like an artist, but that I was a hand letter or that I could do art. And then when people see it, they're like, dude, you've created coloring books. This is a real thing. This is a big thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. I never would have planned that. And I didn't have that in mind. I wasn't, headed down I'm going to do this job so I can be an artist and make money from doing this. It was like, nope, I'm just going with life and coming as it goes. So I think that's important to know, not many people really know what they're doing. And so they, no human can also tell you what to do or how to do certain things. I mean, you can look to them for advice and suggestions, but when it comes to your own life, it's I don't know, you gotta live, you gotta do it yourself. Just keep on going. And then other things, find an honest friend or family member who can give you like, I don't know how to say, like, their honest opinion, like flat out, you know they're going to tell you the truth, whether it's good or bad. It can be hard to hear, but you can rely on them to tell you what it is, how it comes. Just as I said, it was important to wait to share those ideas. Sometimes, I know in high school, I had a friend, she was better at like music, had a better musical ear, and we were in the same musical theater class. I could ask her like, hey, how did I do? And she's like, it's fairly good, but you're pitchy in these parts. And I'm like, oh, like, that's like your worst nightmare, to to be pitchy. But at the same time, I'm like, thank you so much, because now I can practice those areas and I can get better. So keeping that in mind of like, with the intent to make yourself better, and when you have a person you're comfortable with that you know can give you that advice, it's really helpful. And because not everyone is going to be like, you're doing great, but I found at least kind of in high school and college, you start to get people that like you just because you're you. And that's not helpful for getting better at your art, your work, your creative stuff, your business even. Like, you have to ask for advice, knowing like, don't just say like, I like you as a person, or you're friendly, or you look nice. I want, like, take me out of it. Look at the work itself and tell me what you think, because the intent is to get better and always be getting better. I'd say be willing to try new things. A lot of the stuff I do, like, I have no idea most of the time what I'm doing. I'm just like, this sounds cool, I'm going to do this. Or, I'm going to create a clothing line, which I'm like, I don't really know that much about it. And it's really just logos on shirts. So it's not technically a clothing design, but we're going to call it a clothing design, because you can buy a string of my clothes that I created and they can get shipped to you. And then I'd say, like, kind of closing this section out is like, take time to look back at your life and where you are today, just knowing that like, so much has happened, both good and bad, to get you where you are, and you wouldn't be the same person without those experiences. So any of the shortcomings you've had, or the failures, or the things that didn't work out, are just as important as those that did work out, that pushed you forward and made you feel good, knowing that even some of the not so good feelings have really built up your character and strengthened you to get you to where you are today. And similarly, just taking the time to be proud of what you have accomplished. I feel like for myself, that is more difficult. I mean, obviously not now when I'm getting to talk in front of people, because I do like performing and talking and being in the lights. But for myself, like internally, I'm just like, okay, we got that done. On to the next thing. When I graduated college, when I've gone to other graduations, I'm like, wow, these kids worked so hard. They sacrificed so much. Like teary-eyed, like, wow, they're amazing. They did great. And then for myself, I'm graduating. I'm like, yeah, I knew this was coming. I knew since I was a kid I was going to go to college. I was going to graduate. Yeah, just keep going. I finished that. Okay, what's the next thing? So I have to be careful with that too, of like, slow down. It's okay. Like, be proud for what you've accomplished, even if like your inner voice doesn't necessarily feel like that, or that's not how you talk to yourself. You talk to yourself? Yeah, we all talk to ourselves. Hopefully, or you're just like, he's insane. I do think a lot of, very successful people though are a tinge insane and crazy. So either you have to be that way to be successful, or on your way to success, you become insane. We'll have to see. Check back in maybe 10, 15 years if we're all still around. But yeah, I think then I also mentioned it too, but to close this section out, was that a lot of the creative projects, and I think I would say you can even look at this in the different works that you've done, whether it be creative or business-wise, or really anything in life, is taking this mindset of, if it actually is true, but like, I did the best I could with what I had at the time. So a lot of, like I mentioned, the film, when I watch it now, or even I have a live version of me singing songs on iTunes that at the time I was like, I'm just going to do piano and voice because I like that style. It turns out, even when you think you're just hearing piano and voice and songs, there's probably like 10 different other instruments in the background, because when you listen to it, you're just like, okay, we are missing something. Like, something does not sound right. But at the time, like, that was the best I could do, and I was really proud of that. It's just like, now I would do things a lot different, but hey, that doesn't diminish the work that I did at the time, the like proud feelings I had, the accomplishment itself. So I think that, and I've heard this on other shows, so it's not me like, I came up with this mantra or this way to live life. I'm taking it from other shows, another show I watched, and just hearing it from other people out there in the world. But I feel like it's so true because it accurately describes not all the projects I've done, but a lot of the projects I've done. And I think it kind of should almost, because you want to keep getting better. You want to push yourself, do harder things, more challenging things to really help yourself grow. Or at least I do, because I always like to learn and get going. But to close this out, usually we will end with asking the business owner how we can best support them, as well as get in touch with them. I'd say for myself, social media is a good way to do that. At Marlin White, as I said, is how you can find me on all social media. Instagram is probably the most frequented one that I use. So that'll be a good way both to get in contact if you want to direct message me, although I do like emailing. So I would probably, if it was something about doing a creative project together, we'll eventually get you to emailing. But if you do want to reach out, Instagram is a great way to do that. As well as on Instagram, I do share a lot of the creative projects, mostly in my stories that I'm working on, clips of songs I'm doing, just fun stuff of living the life of me. So I think that's fun. You can also check out my website, marlinwhite.com. So that same username with a .com at the end. But you can also on there either contact me, but you can also see all of the creative projects I've talked about. So if you're like, I want to see that short film that you keep talking about, cool, go on there. You can find it. I want to look at your clothing line. Cool, go to my website, you can find it. It's also linked to my Instagram, so you don't have to, but you should definitely at least look at the website. And then finally, I would say just take a look at my books on Amazon. I have an author page, m.marlinwhite. If you search Amazon with that, you can see all 3 different books that I have up there. And that's just a great way to both see the work I did, but also hopefully, if you like what you see, you'll buy them or send them to friends and family. Any holiday or birthday are really good. Kiddos love these coloring books. I learned, because I don't have kids yet, but friends that have kids, like, kids love coloring. They do it all the time, and they always need new books to color. So those are some ways that you could support me. But with that, we have wrapped up and finished our very first Instagram live show. This one was a bit different, as I said, because I am introducing myself, both as the host and being the first guest. But I hope this was a good intro to what is to come. I hope you got to learn a lot about me, but also the process of how I've become who I am, as well as taken some good encouragements and points that you can use in your own daily life or within your creative projects, business projects, whatever you have going for you. You go and you get that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we will be in touch soon. Oh man, you guys, I can't even figure out how to finish this. Okay, I got it now. Adios.